I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla.
The headlines hit like a thunderclap across the UK and beyond. Princess Anne strips Camilla of Queen title. What began as a seemingly routine royal engagement suddenly exploded into a full-blown palace upheaval, captured by flashing cameras, stunned reporters, and a disbelieving public who watched the drama unfold in real time. Camilla, poised as ever, walked out onto the red carpet of a state function, expecting the standard royal introduction. Instead, the outcome was nothing short of public disgrace. The announcer, visibly uncomfortable, stopped before introducing her as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall, a term not heard in years. Camilla thought she lost her title forever. Her smile wavered. Her eyes darted sideways when the camera zoomed. And the mask broke. The reporters did not miss it. Neither did the nation. Palace aides were frantically working behind the scenes. Rumors of an internal power struggle had been circulating for months, but no one anticipated it to emerge so openly, and especially not in this manner. Then came the confirmation. Princess Anne had acted quietly and aggressively, exercising her royal privilege as the late Queen Elizabeth's most trusted enforcer of tradition. Camilla had been stripped not of her riches or her place in Charles's heart, but of her most valuable symbol, the title of Queen. For the first time since Charles took the throne, it was unclear who genuinely held power inside Buckingham Palace. The timing, of course, was no coincidence. Camilla's public image had plunged following months of whispered claims, ranging from her attempts to undermine Kate to her dubious influence over Charles. Many sources cautioned her that she was playing a dangerous game. Few anticipated Anne, the stern nonsense royal who avoided the spotlight, to be the one to bring Camilla's reign to an end. Now, the entire world was watching, not simply out of curiosity, but because something fundamental had changed. The monarchy, already plagued by scandal, succession issues, and fragmented loyalties, had been thrown into a new era. And in the center of it all, Camilla is outraged. Annie is obstinate, and Catherine, the queen-in-waiting, is silently watching and playing the long game. It wasn't simply royal drama. This was a conflict within the crown. The Cold War begins to the outside world. Princess Anne and Queen Camilla had always maintained an uneasy truce, one formed out of royal necessity rather than true affection. But beneath the carefully choreographed smiles, gloved handshakes, and forced talks at palace occasions, a battle had been quietly raging for almost 30 years. A war not of swords, but of quiet judgment, buried resentment, and tradition versus disruption. Their conflict began in the shadow of one woman, Diana, Princess of Wales. Princess Anne had always been extremely loyal to her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and equally fiercely protective of the monarchy's traditions. She was raised not to smile for the cameras or seek tabloid attention, but to serve with discipline, privacy, and duty. So when Diana joined the royal family with her media glamour, Annie initially regarded her as too soft, too emotional, and too preoccupied with public theatrics. But over time, Anne grew to see Diana's role in a different light, not just as Charles's wife, but as a symbol of something the monarchy urgently needed: human connection. When the truth about Charles and Camilla's long-running affair was revealed, Annie was enraged not only at her brother, but also at the woman who, in her opinion, had sullied the sanctity of a royal marriage. Where others murmured or avoided the topic, Annie never concealed her displeasure. Camilla, too, represented everything that could go wrong when private indulgence took precedence over public duty, while Queen Elizabeth accepted Camilla over time, even offering her formal designation as Queen Consort before her death. Annie never completely gave in. She obeyed the rules, attended engagements in pause, but she maintained her distance. Body language analysts frequently observe rigidity between the two. No shared glances, no warmth, no genuine conversation. Simply the frigid civility of two women who had drawn battle lines long ago. It wasn't only personal. It was institutional. Camilla was considered by Anne as a disruptor, having penetrated the monarchy through scandal and gradually twisting protocol to her taste. In Anne's opinion, the role of queen was not something you married into after a decade-or-so-long relationship. It had to be earned through sacrifice, commitment, and a flawless public record. Camilla, in Anne's opinion, possessed none of these characteristics. Camilla, for her part, disliked Anne's cold demeanor. Camilla had fought her way to grudging acceptance after years of being demonized by the press and the public. What about Annie? She never soft. Camilla became frustrated as a result of her inflexibility. The breaking point when Charles came to the throne, Camilla thought her transformation was complete. Her lengthy, hard journey culminated in the title of queen consort. What she didn't realize was that Anne had never genuinely accepted the promotion and was only biding her time. Insiders believed the Cold War erupted behind closed doors shortly after the coronation. Camilla, emboldened by her new title, began to press for changes, modifying seating arrangements at formal gatherings, suggesting alterations to charitable focus areas that conflicted with Anne's causes, and even hinting about increased exposure for her own grandchildren within the royal line. Annie was watching, and she wasn't impressed. According to sources close to the palace, the two women exchanged chilly looks during a private Windsor reception. Camilla jokingly referred to herself as the real matriarch, now raising a glass with smug confidence. Annie allegedly answered immediately, "You may wear the crown, but it doesn't mean you carry its weight." It was more than just a bar. It was a warning, and now that warning has been translated into action. With her mother gone, Anna regarded herself as the only real defender of royal tradition, a steadfast force in a monarchy beset by scandal and reinvention. And when Camilla crossed one too many lines, Annie acted without hesitation, the final straw. In the royal world, power is rarely acquired through spectacular gestures. It's conveyed through whispers, glances, and well-placed suggestions. And in Camilla's case, intimate dinners and modest requests, which are frequently disguised as tradition or modernization. However, those who paid close attention could see that Camilla was making a planned move to strengthen her control behind palace gates, and it was her most recent maneuver that ruptured the delicate balance, propelling Princess Anne from silent scorn to open conflict. The offense, a strong endeavor to integrate her own family deeper into royal protocol. Camilla had long advocated for her children Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes to remain outside the system. In public they were portrayed as private persons, rarely seen, but never powerful. But behind closed doors, the story began to change. According to high-level palace sources, Camilla began campaigning for Tom Parker Bowles to be assigned a formal advisory post within the royal household. The role would put him in close contact with senior advisors, allowing him to participate in delicate planning for royal occasions and potentially discuss succession matters. Annie was furious. To her, it was an outrageous breach of protocol, not only because Tom lacked a royal title, but also because such a position was traditionally reserved for people born into the bloodline rather than those brought in by marriage. Annie recognized it for what it was: Camilla attempting to rewrite history. But that was not all. Camilla also reportedly advocated a change in royal precedents, a slight but seismic alteration in who stands where, who enters first, and who sits at whose table. Outsiders may dismiss these as ceremonial trifles, yet in the palace they represent power and respect. Camilla also desired to promote her side of the family, even above working royals who had spent their lives serving the crown. This was Anne's breaking point. She had put up with Camilla's vanity, projects, her sleeve barbs at Catherine, and her overpowering influence on Charles. But Camilla was no longer just questioning convention. She was attempting to alter the monarchy's DNA and vented her rage in private council. She reminded Charles that titles and protocol were sacred and should not be twisted for the sake of personal legacy. But Charles, ever the diplomat, attempted to smooth things over. He said Camilla's comments were only modernizing proposals. Nothing more. He dismissed Anne's concerns as old-fashioned rigidity. It was a grave error. Anne understood the palace would never endure if it became a playground for personal dynasties, particularly those who had previously shattered the public's faith with their stormy rise. Camilla's children, however well-behaved or brilliant, were not royalty, and the prospect of them gaining prominence while William, Kate, and their children bore the crown's destiny seemed treacherous to Anne. Those closest to Anne claimed she left that encounter with one clear decision. Camilla had gone too far. She could no longer bear the title of queen, especially because she was using it to reconstruct the monarchy in her own image. Anne would not stand for it. She would not wait for Charles's permission to act confrontation at Bow. It was intended to be a tranquil weekend retreat, one of those rare royal gatherings away from the tumult of London held within the ancient stone walls of Balmoral Castle, where family history hung heavily in every passage. But this time Balmoral was not a haven of tranquility. It became the setting for a clash that had been brewing for decades. Princess Anne had called the gathering. Those in the royal circle understood what that meant and did not call meetings. She showed up, did her job, remained silent, and allowed the institution to speak for itself. However, when a formal request came directly from the Princess Royal with an urgency that required everyone's presence, the palace paid attention. Charles came exhausted, ignorant of how far things had deteriorated. Camilla, confident but cautious, thought she could talk her way out of it. She had done it previously when scandals erupted, detractors murmured, and Diana's name loomed like a shadow. But this time, Anne was different. The discussion took place in one of the smaller drawing rooms away from staff ears. Charles, Camilla, Anne, and a few senior aides were in attendance, but no one dared to speak unless called upon. Anne did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She presented a case based on protocol rather than emotion with her typical precision. She identified instances, emails, and discussions instigated by Camilla, all of which attempted to restructure the monarchy's power structure in ways that compromised both royal precedence and public trust. Camilla's use of the Queen title in official ceremonial context was revoked, and she reverted to Duchess of Cornwall in all events where the sovereign was not present, and then produced a prepared statement invoking her authority as Colonel of the Blues and Royals, a senior royal peer, and Queen Elizabeth II's only daughter. Charles quickly protested. His voice was more emotional than commanding, pleading with Anne to reconsider. "She is my wife," he explained. "She is queen." Anne's response was icy cold. "She may be your wife, Charles, but she's hardly the queen your mother envisioned." Camilla, trapped between disbelief and indignation, snapped. "You are not the monarch," she hissed. "No," Anne replied, rising slowly. "But I'm my mother's daughter, and she trusted me to defend what she had accomplished." Even the aides averted their gaze during this tense moment. Camilla stormed out shortly after, slamming the door behind her. Charles sat in stunned silence, and Anne, never dramatic or passionate, placed the signed document on the table, nodded curtly, and walked away. Within hours, internal palace messages had been distributed to event organizers, press, liaison, and royal personnel. The Princess Royal directed that all references to Queen Camilla be updated immediately. There was no public statement. No press conference was conducted. However, the transformation became visible after a few days. Announcers fumbled. Programs were immediately reprinted at her next public appearance. Camilla was introduced as the Duchess of Cornwall, rather than the Queen. Anne had drawn a line in the sand. Camilla was stripped not by scandal or the press, but by a woman who quietly observed her rise and determined to stop her. The public humiliation music. The environment was regal, refined, and deceptively relaxing. Dignitaries mingled beneath towering chandeliers, and the red carpet of the Royal Academy's fundraising banquet shone under camera lights. It was intended to be a routine engagement, one of many on Queen Camilla's calendar. She arrived in full regalia, sparkling in a diamond tiara and sapphire gown. Charles by her side, smiles were painted on. However, beneath the velvet and grandeur, history was about to recast itself. Camilla had practiced this moment 1,000 times. The ceremony was simple, a quick walk to the stage, a formal introduction by the event host, and a brief speech easy familiar. However, she had not prepared for the host opening words. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall." Gasp, silence, and awkward clapping. Camilla froze in mid-step. At first she believed she had misheard. Her face flickered just for a second, but the cameras captured it. Her eyes moved toward the host, then to Charles, who appeared equally astonished. And in that moment the truth dawned on her. This was no mistake. There was no warning, no private communication. This was not a leaked headline or tabloid rumor. It was a public declaration performed with surgical precision. From the sidelines, aides were visibly rattled. One leaned toward an event coordinator. Another searched for a phone, but the damage was done. The cameras had filmed the moment, and the Duchess, no longer queen, was humiliated on the global stage. Reporter season in deciphering palace tension quickly began whispering among themselves. "Did you hear that?" one murmured. "They just demoted her out loud." The whispers became tweets, which blossomed into headlines. Camilla, to her credit, pushed on with the speech, her voice trembling at first, but she studied it. Years of royal media training kicking in. But the damage was done. Every photograph, video, and social media post from the event bore a title she thought she'd left behind: The Aftermath. Camilla was reportedly inconsolable when she returned to the palace that night and demanded an explanation. Staff attempted to deflect, blaming it on a clerical error. But Camilla knew better. The phrase was too clear, too clean, and someone had given a very specific order. And that person was Princess Anne. It wasn't simply a slap in the face. It was a power move carried out in plain sight, not through press briefings or gossip columns, but by changing a single word in a royal script. That was all it needed to undo years of work, editorials praised. Anne's quiet strength, calling it a restoration of royal order. Memes flooded timelines. Duchess again trended on Twitter. And Camilla's stunned expression was juxtaposed with photos of Princess Anne looking stone-faced and victorious. The real damage, however, was done inside the palace rather than online. The hierarchy had been appended not with fanfare, but in silence. Camilla received a severe and unambiguous message. "Your crown was borrowed, and it has now been returned." Camilla stepped back into Clarence's house after the gala, and the facade broke. Camilla erupted in a fury that hadn't been seen since the early days of Diana's media dominance, hurling crystal glassware at the wall and shattering a vase near the fireplace. Her voice, normally hushed and restrained, thundered through the halls as she demanded answers, names, and retribution. "How dare she?" Camilla reportedly exclaimed. "How dare Annie humiliate me like this in front of the world?" According to palace insiders, the queen consort was unrecognizable, sobbing, pacing, and shouting about betrayal. She lashed out at aides, accused secretaries of siding with the old guard, and even demanded a full internal investigation into who had coordinated the introduction sabotage. But no one needed to spell it out. Everyone knew this wasn't a mistake. It was an execution, and Princess Annie was the executioner. Camilla's rage quickly turned to despair, and she locked herself away in her private quarters for hours. The woman who had clawed her way from mistress to monarch now found herself publicly dethroned by a single phrase. Her decades-long battle for legitimacy had been reduced to dust in less than 30 seconds on stage. The royal family divided. Camilla, however, was not the only one crumbling. According to close staff, King Charles, already strained by the pressures of modern monarchy, and a divided family, was in emotional freefall when he confronted Annie in a private call shortly after the gala. What began as a calm conversation reportedly exploded into a bitter argument between siblings rooted not just in titles, but in decades of unresolved pain. "You've crossed a line," Anne Charles allegedly said. Annie responded, "No, Charles, you did the moment you crowned her queen." The call ended with silence. According to those close to Charles, he spent the night pacing his private library, unsure whether to issue a statement override Anne's directive or simply let the matter die down. But he knew one thing for certain. If he moved publicly to reinstate Camilla's title, he would spark a war, not only with Anne, but also with the growing faction within the family, who saw Camilla as a threat to the monarchy's future. That faction included not only Anne, but silently, William and Catherine, the future of the royal family. The pair stayed silent during the drama, but reports indicate their lack of support spoke loudly. They had not interfered on Camilla's behalf, nor had they attempted to stop Anne. Even more telling, Charles received a private message from William the following morning, simply stating, "We need to protect the crown, not personalities." It was a dagger, and Charles knew it. Charles struggled to maintain his love for Camilla while honoring the institution he inherited. However, Camilla had lost the family's favor, leaving him with an impossible choice: stand by his wife and face open rebellion, or let her fade into royal history. For the first time since ascending the throne, the king was paralyzed. The new order, Camilla, stripped, silent, and humiliated, realized that her adversaries had done more than just disgrace her. They had outmaneuvered her. In the end, there were no formal declarations, news conferences, or public acknowledgement of what had happened. Yet everyone understood that the monarchy had been reset, not by the king, but by the Princess Royal Princess. Anne, long undervalued and overlooked, had done what no one else dared. She defended the crown by action, not gossip or controversy. She didn't shout or grandstand. She just utilized her authority, bloodline, and her mother's trust to accomplish what she thought was right, and the monarchy, unsettled, strained, and wobbling after years of turmoil, stood taller. As a result, Camilla, once poised to cement her legacy as queen, now found herself quietly receding into the shadows. The glamorous engagements became fewer. The front page spreads faded, and whispers of her influence grew colder within palace walls. She remained Charles's wife, yes, but she was no longer the crown jewel of his reign. The title was gone, and so was the illusion of undisputed power. Charles, too, appeared to have changed those closest to him, described a quieter monarch, contemplative, withdrawn, deeply aware that the unity of the royal family no longer revolved around him, but around the future. William, Catherine, Charlotte, and George, the next generation, poised with grace and public favor, now carried the symbolic weight of continuity. However, it was Anne who had sparked the transformation. She reminded the nation that the monarchy was not established on popularity, contests, or media manipulation, but on duty, hierarchy, and tradition. Ideals she had lived by since the day she was born. When she witnessed those values being twisted for personal advantage, she took action. Her decision was quietly hailed as a masterstroke within royal circles, though it didn't dominate headlines or attract widespread attention. It addressed a crown that had slowly been tarnished by vanity and arrogance. Now it had been refined not with spectacle, but with integrity, and in that silent triumph, Anne didn't just reclaim a title, she rekindled the very soul of the monarchy.